I need to tell you something. Something I've held on to for years. A secret that's been eating away at me. What I'm about to share might sound like it's straight out of a movie, but I assure you, it's my reality. It all started when I was a junior data analyst, fresh out of college, working under a government contract. My job was seemingly mundane, digitizing old military records. Sounds boring, right? That's what they wanted everyone to think. I was stationed at a secure facility, a place most people don't even know exists. Rows upon rows of servers humming day and night. My clearance level was low, giving me access only to declassified files from decades ago. I spent months scanning reports on logistical operations, procurement records, personnel files from the 50s and 60s. It was tedious, repetitive work. But I'm a naturally curious person. I started noticing inconsistencies, little things that didn't add up. Redacted file numbers that didn't match any known classification system. Cross-references to projects that had no official record. One late night, fueled by too much coffee and a growing obsession, I stumbled upon a digital backdoor. It was an old maintenance protocol left over from a system upgrade, a ghost in the machine. A simple command line interface that, to my shock, granted me elevated privileges for a short window. My heart was pounding in my chest. This was it. The moment you see in films where the character has a choice, walk away or dive down the rabbit hole. I dove. For the next few weeks, I lived a double life. By day, I was the diligent analyst, scanning mundane documents. By night, I was a digital ghost, navigating a labyrinth of classified data. I had to be incredibly careful. I used anonymous proxies, bounced signals, and covered my tracks meticulously. I knew that if I was caught, I wouldn't just be fired. I'd disappear. The first file I opened changed everything. It was codenamed Project Nightingale. Officially, it was a Cold War-era meteorological study. But the real files told a different story. They were logs from a series of high-altitude atmospheric tests. But these weren't weather balloons. They were tracking anomalous aerial phenomena, objects that moved at impossible speeds and executed maneuvers that defied our known laws of physics. The reports were filled with pilot testimonies, radar data, and grainy black and white photos. These pilots weren't crackpots. They were decorated officers, and their reports were stamped verified and urgent. Yet, publicly, these events were dismissed as weather anomalies or swamp gas. That was just the beginning. I found files on Project Aquarius, which wasn't about marine biology, but about recovering technology from non-terrestrial sources. I read field reports from crash retrievals, detailed reverse engineering logs, and analyses of materials with isotopic ratios not found naturally on Earth. They had schematics, metallurgical reports, and even biological assessments. The level of detail was staggering. This wasn't speculation. It was applied science, conducted in secret for over 70 years. I saw memos discussing the psychological impact of public disclosure. There were heated debates between factions within the military and intelligence communities. One group argued for a slow, controlled release of information, believing humanity wasn't ready for the full truth. Another, more dominant group advocated for a permanent cover-up, fearing societal collapse, religious upheaval, and the loss of their own power and control. They systematically created disinformation campaigns, funded debunking efforts, and even discredited their own personnel to maintain the veil of secrecy. I found documents detailing technologies we use every day, things like fiber optics, microprocessors, and even certain advanced materials whose development was massively accelerated by these secret programs. The official story of their invention was a carefully constructed narrative to hide their true origin. We're living with the fruits of this hidden reality, completely unaware of where it came from. It's like we've been given a few puzzle pieces from a much larger, more incredible picture and told that's all there is. One of the most chilling discoveries was Project Chimera. It wasn't about technology. It was about perception management. This was the playbook for the cover-up. It detailed methods for manipulating media, planting false stories, and using psychological operations on the public. It outlined how to use ridicule as a weapon, ensuring that anyone who got too close to the truth would be branded as a conspiracy theorist and ostracized. It was a masterclass in information control, and seeing it laid bare made me sick to my stomach. It explained why, for decades, the topic was a career killer for serious journalists and scientists. It was all by design. I started downloading everything I could onto encrypted drives. I knew I couldn't keep this to myself. This truth didn't belong to a shadowy group of generals and bureaucrats. It belonged to everyone. But the deeper I went, the more paranoid I became. I felt eyes on me everywhere. My computer at work started lagging inexplicably. Twice, my apartment was broken into, but nothing was stolen. They were sending a message. They knew. The night I decided to get out was terrifying. I was in the system, copying a particularly sensitive file about a live biological specimen, when a system-wide alert flashed across my screen. Unauthorized access detected. Protocol Zeta initiated. My blood ran cold. Protocol Zeta was a complete system wipe and lockdown. I had seconds. I managed to sever my connection and pull my last drive just as the alarms started blaring in the physical facility. I grabbed my go bag, which I'd prepared weeks before, and walked out, trying to look as calm as possible while my world was collapsing. I've been on the run ever since. Living off the grid, changing my name, my appearance, always looking over my shoulder. They've erased my existence. My official records, my social security number, my academic history, it's all gone. As far as the world is concerned, I never existed, but I have the proof. I have the files. Why am I telling you this now? Because the weight of this secret is too much to bear alone. And because I believe the world has changed. People are more open, more connected. The old methods of control are losing their power. The truth has a way of getting out, but it needs a catalyst. I'm choosing to be that catalyst. I know the risks I'm taking by making this video. By putting my face out there, they will come for me. But I've spent years setting up dead man switches. If I disappear, the complete unredacted archive goes public. All of it. Project Nightingale, Aquarius, Chimera, and dozens more you can't even imagine. It will be messy. It will be chaotic, but it will be the truth. This isn't just about strange lights in the sky. It's about our history, our technology, and our future. It's about who we are and our place in the universe. We have been lied to on a scale that is almost impossible to comprehend. The people we entrusted with our protection have been gatekeeping the single most important discovery in human history. This is my confession and my declaration. I am no longer just a data analyst. I am a witness. What you do with this information is up to you. Be skeptical, ask questions, but don't dismiss it. Demand answers from those in power. The truth is out there, but it's been deliberately buried. It's time for us to start digging. Thank you for listening. And please share this. The more people who know, the safer I might be, and the closer we all get to the real story. Let me tell you something most people won't admit. Sometimes the line between curiosity and recklessness gets blurrier than a foggy morning. There I was standing outside a military archive that was technically closed to the public, technically guarded, technically off limits in every way that matters. The thing about military archive security is that it's designed to stop honest people, locks, badges, procedures. But when you realize that curiosity can be a skeleton key for certain kinds of doors, well, that's when you face a choice that defines who you are. Do you accept the no access sign as final, or do you start looking for the story behind the story? Now, before you get the wrong idea, let me be clear. I'm not advocating breaking laws. What I am saying is that there's a difference between rules that protect and rules that conceal. That archive wasn't protecting national security. It was protecting institutional embarrassment. And that's a distinction that matters. See, I'd spent 6 months going through proper channels, filing FOIA requests, asking politely for access to documents that were technically declassified. And what did I get? Delays, redactions, lost records, and bureaucracy thicker than the documents themselves. Sometimes the system isn't broken, it's working exactly as designed to keep things hidden. Here's a practical insight for anyone chasing truth in any field. When official channels fail, you don't give up. You get creative within ethical boundaries. I'm not talking about breaking and entering. I'm talking about finding alternative paths to information. For example, many closed archives have former employees who remember things, or related collections in university libraries, or even auction houses that occasionally sell declassified materials. My mistake was in wanting the information. My mistake was thinking the front door was the only way in. But that night, as I found an actual physical way into a place I shouldn't have been, well, that's when things got real in ways I never expected. Alright, so there I am inside, and the first thing that hits you is the dust or the silence. It's the smell. Old paper, aging leather, and something else. Ozone maybe from old electronics? The place was a time capsule of classified documents that hadn't seen sunlight in decades. Organized in a system that made sense only to people who didn't want anyone else making sense of it. But here's what surprised me. The most interesting stuff was in the top secret section. It was in boxes marked administrative historical reference, which in archive speak usually means boring paperwork nobody will ever check. That's where they hide the good stuff, in plain sight, but disguised as bureaucracy. Let me paint you a picture that changed how I understand information hunting. One shelf had 3 identical-looking boxes. Box A was labeled Operation Moonlight, classified. Box B was Moonlight Logistics, unclassified. Box C was Moonlight Administrative Routine. Everyone goes for Box A, right? That's what I did first. But Box A was mostly redacted pages and formal reports saying nothing. Box C, the boring one, had handwritten notes between officers, coffee-stained meeting minutes, and margin comments that told the real story. The lesson? Historical truth often lives in the places nobody thinks to look. dressed up as something unimportant. Here are something you can use today in your own research. Always check the boring sections first. Whether you're researching company history, family genealogy, or any topic really, the administrative records, the meeting minutes, the internal memos that seem routine often contain the real gems. I once helped a friend understand why her grandfather's business failed by looking at his office supply receipts rather than his financial statements. Turns out he stopped ordering stationery months before the official collapse, a sign he'd given up internally long before externally. In that archive, the boring box held a folder that shouldn't have been there at all. And that folder, well, that's where things got really interesting. So I'm going through this administrative box, and my fingers literally freeze on a folder that's different from the others. It's not the color or the label, it's the weight. There's something inside that's not paper, or at least not just paper. I open it, and there's a standard report about equipment maintenance, but paper clipped to the back is a single sheet that changes everything. It's a memorandum, but not the typed formal kind. This is handwritten, urgent, and starts with words that still give me chills. Official account incorrect. Actual sequence follows. We're talking about government secrets hidden inside paperwork about Jeep maintenance schedules. The audacity of it, the sheer cleverness. Who thinks to look there? Now, hear us where it gets really wild. This memorandum contradicts the official historical record of a well-known military operation in ways that aren't just details. They fundamental rewrites. The official story says planning took 3 months. This memo shows decisions made in 3 hours. The history books talk about careful deliberation. This shows panic and improvisation. The public narrative describes coordinated efforts. This reveals near chaos saved by one person's quick thinking, and the person who wrote it. Someone who was there, someone whose name appears in the official records as a minor participant, not the central figure this memo reveals them to be. That's forbidden knowledge of the most delicious kind, truth hiding in plain sight. Let me give you a framework for spotting these contradictions in any field. Look for the gaps between the polished version and the messy reality. In business, compare the press release about a product launch with the internal emails from the development team. In history, compare the official report with the personal diaries of participants. In that memo, the gap wasn't just about facts, it was about tone. Official reports use passive voice and formal language. This memo was raw, immediate, human. We didn't know what the hell we were doing versus operations proceeded according to revised contingency planning. Same events, completely different stories. And the reason this particular truth was buried, well, that's not about national security. It's about something much more human. Alright, so you're probably thinking, if this memo was so important, why hide it in a maintenance file? Why not destroy it? Here's the counterintuitive truth about archive concealment. Sometimes things aren't hidden to protect secrets, but to protect reputations. This particular operation had become foundational mythology for a certain military branch, taught in academies, cited in doctrine, held up as an example of excellence. The problem? The reality was messy, confused, and succeeded mostly due to luck and individual initiative rather than brilliant planning. Destroying the memo would have been safer, but hiding Hiding it preserved the option of truth while maintaining the fiction. Let me explain a pattern I've seen in multiple archives now. They're as often what I call strategic preservation. They keep the embarrassing truth, but bury it so deep that only someone either very lucky or very determined will find it. This serves two purposes. First, if the truth ever needs to come out, say, for historical accuracy decades later, it exists. Second, and more cynically, it protects the institution from accusations of destroying evidence. Think about it. If someone asks, "Do you have records about X?" they can technically say yes without revealing that those records contradict the official story. It's historical narrative management at its most sophisticated, and once you see it, you start seeing it everywhere. Here is how you can apply this insight. When you encounter any official story that seems too clean, too heroic, too perfect, ask yourself, what messy truth might be preserved somewhere, waiting to be found? In your own life, this might mean looking at the polished social media version of someone's life and wondering about the unshared struggles. In business, it might mean reading between the lines of annual reports. That memo in the archive taught me that truth often survives, but it survives in the corners, in the margins, in places designed to be overlooked. And finding it? Well, finding it comes with a cost that nobody talks about until you're paying it. So here is the part nobody prepares you for. Once you know something you weren't supposed to know, you can't unknow it. That memo in the archive didn't just change my understanding of history, it changed how I moved through the world. Suddenly, every official narrative feels potentially incomplete. Every polished story seems like it might have a messy backstory. That's the real cost of truth-seeking. It makes you permanently suspicious in a healthy way, but also isolates you because most people prefer the comfortable fiction to the uncomfortable reality. You become the person at the dinner party who says, "Actually, it's more complicated than that," and watches the conversation die. Let me be brutally honest about what happened after I left that archive. For weeks, I struggled with whether to share what I'd found. Not because of legal concerns, the documents were declassified, but because some truths don't just inform, they burden. Knowing that a celebrated historical moment was actually chaos covered up with good PR, that knowledge sits with you and makes you wonder what other celebrated moments are similarly sanitized. And more personally, it makes you question your own memories, your own stories. How much of what you know about your own life is the polished version versus the messy truth? But here's the practical takeaway, and this is crucial. Not all truths need to be shared, but all truths need to be integrated. What I mean is, when you discover something that changes your understanding, you have to decide what to do with that knowledge. In my case, I chose to share it here with you, but I also chose to be careful about how and when. Some truths are grenades, you don't throw them casually. My advice to anyone pursuing knowledge, whether in archives or anywhere else, be prepared for what you might find and have a plan for what you'll do with it. Because the archive wasn't the hard part, living with what I found there, that's the ongoing challenge. Well, that's what separates casual curiosity from committed truth-seeking. So let me ask you the real question. Now that you know truths can be hidden in plain sight, what are you going to do differently? Are you going to keep accepting polished narratives at face value? Or are you going to start looking for the administrative files, The margin notes, the boring details that might contain the real story? Because here, that's the uncomfortable truth about truth. It doesn't usually come with fanfare or dramatic reveals. It comes in manila folders and forgotten boxes, in coffee-stained memos, in the places too mundane to seem important until you understand their significance. Think about this seriously. What official story in your life needs a second look? Is it something from history you've always accepted? A company narrative you've been told? Even your own personal memories? The methodology is the same. Look for the gaps between the polished version. And the likely reality, search for the administrative records rather than the official reports. Pay attention to what's preserved but not promoted. That archive taught me that truth isn't always lost. Sometimes it's just waiting for someone to ask the right questions in the right places. Now, I need to hear from you. This isn't a one-way street. Drop a comment and tell me, where in your life have you found a hidden in plain sight truth? Was it in old family documents, in work records, in something everyone overlooked because it seemed too ordinary? Or maybe you've had that moment of realizing an accepted story was incomplete or misleading. This is how we build a community of people who value reality over narrative, who understand that sometimes the most important things are hiding where nobody thinks to look. Share your stories, your discoveries, your questions. All right, last thing, and this is non-negotiable if you want to keep getting this unfiltered access to how the world really works. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications right now. Because here's what's coming next. We diving into the psychology of why we accept polished narratives so easily. And more importantly, how to develop what I call narrative immune system. We'll look at actual psychological studies, historical examples, and practical exercises that train you to spot when you're being fed a sanitized version of reality. But you'll miss it if you're not subscribed. So do it now, before you get distracted by the next shiny, polished story. Because the next video might just give you the mental tools to never be fooled by surface narratives again. Subscribe, hit the bell, and let's keep pursuing actual truth together.